The winter of 1942 crept across the Soviet steppe like a silent predator, its frost biting into the bones of men who had already seen too much death. In the east, the rumble of engines and the steady march of boots across frozen ground heralded a storm that would consume a city, a generation, a war itself. Stalingrad, a name that would come to haunt soldiers and civilians alike, lay on the Volga, a sprawling industrial heart of the Soviet Union, cradling factories, apartment blocks, and desperate lives. Smoke curled from chimneys and the scent of bread and soot mingled in the air, but soon it would be drowned by the acrid tang of gunpowder and blood. German columns, sleek and methodical, tore across the steppe, their tanks grinding over frozen earth as artillery shells screamed from the distance. Soviet scouts reported every movement, yet the knowledge brought little comfort, only the bitter awareness that the city itself would become a tomb. On the outskirts, civilians clutched what they could, eyes hollow yet defiant, watching neighbors fall to despair as the Luftwaffe painted the sky with fire. Streets that had once rung with children's laughter now echoed with the distant thunder of incoming shells. Inside Stalingrad, soldiers huddled in the ruins, their breaths misting in the cold, their eyes wide with fear, every heartbeat a countdown. Men who had marched for miles, who had seen comrades torn apart, now faced the unimaginable, urban warfare at its most brutal. Every building was a fortress, every doorway a death trap, every alley a gauntlet. Snipers crouched in shattered windows, waiting to turn a fleeting shadow into a lifeless body. The city itself became a character in the carnage, each street corner whispering stories of sacrifice, courage, and madness. The first explosions of the battle shattered the stillness like glass, ripping through walls and tearing apart dreams. Soviet artillery returned fire, each shell a desperate plea to the gods of war, to slow the advance, to buy a moment of breathing space. Smoke choked the sky, mingling with the frigid air, and the roar of gunfire became a pulse, a rhythm that neither side could escape. Men froze in the open, torn between running and fighting, while others charged forward, driven by orders, desperation, or sheer survival instinct. Tanks crushed vehicles beneath iron tracks, while grenades transformed streets into molten chaos. Amid the terror, human moments pierced the haze. A soldier shared his last piece of bread with a comrade shivering beside him. A young woman dragged a wounded stranger into a cellar, ignoring the screams above. A father whispered promises to his child as the walls shook with each explosion. These fragments of humanity persisted against a backdrop of destruction, fleeting but stubborn. Every act of courage was a flicker in a night that seemed infinite. Every loss a hammer to the chest of everyone who survived to witness it. By mid-August, the city was a battlefield in the truest sense, a tangle of rubble, fire, and human determination. German forces clawed forward, but each street, each factory, each cellar was a cage, and the defenders moved like shadows, striking then disappearing, leaving nothing but fear in their wake. Hunger gnawed at both sides, frostbitten fingers slipped from rifles, and exhaustion blurred the line between man and machine. Commands shouted over the roar of combat were swallowed by explosions. Every order carried the weight of life and death. The war was no longer just strategic. It was intimate, a fight for each breath, each heartbeat, each pulse of existence. As the days stretched into weeks, the air thickened with despair. Corpses lay frozen where they fell, half buried in rubble or snow, their faces etched with the terror of their final moments. Survivors scavenged, fought, and prayed, clinging to fragments of hope in a city that had become a crucible of suffering. The winter winds carried the stench of decay, gunpowder, and desperation, mingling into a perfume of war that would haunt anyone who entered. And yet, amid the unrelenting horror, Stalingrad refused to fall. Every street taken had to be wrested with blood. Every inch gained was paid in agony. In the night, the city was a ghost, punctuated by sporadic gunfire and the groans of the wounded. Soldiers whispered of home, of loved ones, of a life that seemed impossibly distant. Fear was no longer an emotion, it was a companion, one that clung to them through every raid, every skirmish, every frozen dawn. The Germans pushed, relentless, their ideology, demanding victory at all costs, but the Soviet defenders responded with a grim ferocity born of necessity, pride, and survival. Stalingrad became a test of human limits, a proving ground for courage, cruelty, and the raw will to endure. By September, the battle had morphed into a machine of attrition. Factories were stripped to rubble, residential blocks hollowed out by artillery, and the riverbanks of the Volga became graveyards for the fallen and dying. Smoke and ash painted the sky, sunlight fractured through clouds of dust and flame, casting long, trembling shadows over soldiers too weary to care. The city's pulse was a cadence of suffering, each heartbeat synchronized with the explosion of shells, the crack of rifles, and the distant screams of men and women trapped in the inferno. Commanders on both sides faced impossible choices, sending men into mazes of destruction, knowing every order could be their last moral judgment. Amid this inferno, small victories became monumental. A barricade held, a sniper shot found its mark, a wounded soldier crawled to safety. These fragments of hope were tiny sparks in a city consumed by fire, but they were enough to fuel determination. Civilians moved through the shadows, gathering food, tending the wounded, refusing to vanish entirely into despair. And yet, for every triumph, the city paid a heavier price. Homes obliterated, families scattered, and the endless echo of suffering embedded into the very stones of Stalingrad. The first act of this tragedy closed with the city firmly contested but unbroken. Soldiers and civilians alike understood the truth of the battle. Stalingrad would not simply be taken, it would demand everything from all who entered, and it would leave nothing behind but ruin and memory. The winter ahead promised death, exhaustion, and despair, but also a strange, stubborn heartbeat of resistance. Somewhere in the frozen rubble, humanity persisted, fragile yet unyielding, against a storm of fire, metal, and ideology that sought to erase it. The gathering storm had become an inferno, and the world was about to witness the full extent of the horror and courage that defined the Battle of Stalingrad. By November 1942, Stalingrad had become a frozen grave for thousands, yet the city's heart still beat with stubborn defiance. The Germans believed the Soviets would crumble under hunger, frost, and relentless artillery. They underestimated the human spirit. Soviet forces, battered and starving, clawed their way through ruins with an almost spectral determination, turning the city's rubble into fortresses, its alleys into traps. Every street, every destroyed building was a battlefield, every shadow a sniper's hiding place. Men moved silently, their breath misting in the icy air, rifles trembling in numb fingers, aware that one misstep could mean death. The tide began to shift not with grand charges, but with calculated patience, cunning, and desperation. Soviet commanders launched Operation Uranus, encircling German forces in a vice of winter and strategic precision. German soldiers who had once advanced confidently across the steppe now found themselves trapped, cold seeping into bones already bruised by exhaustion and fear. Starvation gnawed at their resolve, frostbite silenced the bravest, and the city they thought they would dominate became a prison of fire and ice. The Volga flowed like a silver vein through the chaos, carrying bodies, supplies, and whispers of hope. Inside the encirclement, the Germans confronted the slow horror of entrapment. Hunger and disease became as lethal as bullets. Soldiers huddled for warmth, eyes hollow, hands shaking not just from cold, but from despair. Letters from home, once a comfort, were now reminders of a life slipping away. Commanders issued orders that could not be obeyed without sacrifice. Each decision carved new wounds, into the fragile humanity of men already broken. Meanwhile, Soviet troops pressed from the outside, determined not just to win, but to punish, to reclaim, and to survive. Every attack was a mixture of strategy and vengeance, every captured trench a testament to persistence against unimaginable odds. Amid the chaos, the civilians of Stalingrad endured in silence and terror. Families scavenged among shattered streets, cooking on improvised fires, nursing the sick, and burying the dead beneath layers of frost and rubble. The city itself bore witness, crumbling yet resilient, every ruined building a testament to human suffering and stubborn hope. Children too young to understand the machinery of war hid in basements, hearing the distant roar of artillery and the sharp crack of rifles, imprinting forever the nightmarish soundscape of survival. Humanity persisted in the smallest gestures, a loaf of bread shared, a wounded man carried to safety, a whispered prayer against the storm. As December arrived, Stalingrad was almost unrecognizable. Snow lay thick over skeletal ruins, masking pools of blood and debris. Yet the city's defenders had transformed the impossible into reality. The encirclement tightened, the Germans grew weaker, and the winter became a weapon as cruel as any cannon. Every day, every battle, every human choice mattered. Soldiers on both sides moved like ghosts in the blizzard, their humanity tested by exhaustion, hunger, and the constant presence of death. Survivors counted themselves lucky if they woke each morning with all limbs intact, aware that the next sunrise might not come. The turning of the tide was neither quick nor clean. Skirmishes erupted in every sector, snipers claimed lives from shattered windows, and artillery pounded both defenders and the trapped invaders indiscriminately. Yet the Soviets adapted, exploiting the terrain, the ruins, and the morale of a trapped enemy. Encirclement became a methodical squeeze, cutting supplies and hope alike. Soldiers endured frostbite, illness, and constant fear, but their determination, their stubborn refusal to surrender, reshaped the course of history. Stalingrad was no longer just a city, it was a symbol of defiance, a heartbeat against the machinery of an invading force. By February 1943, the German Sixth Army had exhausted its strength. Hunger, disease, and relentless assault had sapped both morale and life. Capitulation was inevitable. Men who had marched with pride, who had believed in the invincibility of their regime, now shuffled from ruins into captivity, eyes vacant, shoulders hunched under the weight of shame and survival. Soviet troops, though battered, exhausted, and mourning the cost, stood victorious, the city still in ruins but unbroken. Stalingrad had endured, and in doing so, had shifted the momentum of the Eastern Front. The echoes of its streets told stories of courage, suffering, and the raw brutality of war. In the aftermath, the scale of the human toll became apparent. Over 1 million soldiers and civilians had perished, each death leaving a scar on the soul of the city and the world. Yet amidst the ruins, life persisted. Survivors rebuilt homes, mourned lost family and comrades, and carried memories that would shape generations. Stalingrad became both a grave and a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, resilience could defy the overwhelming weight of destruction. The battle's legacy would echo through history, a testament to strategy, courage, and the unyielding spirit of those who refused to surrender. Reflection on the battle reveals its profound impact. Stalingrad did not merely halt the German advance, it marked the turning of a war, the point where hope returned to those fighting tyranny. The battle's horrors forged an unspoken understanding of human limits and resilience. Ordinary men and women caught in the machinery of total war demonstrated both the depths of suffering and the heights of courage. Stalingrad became more than a battlefield. It became a symbol of endurance, of sacrifice, and of the heavy cost of freedom. The city, scarred but alive, stood as a warning and a memorial. Soldiers who survived carried memories that would never fade, stories that would teach, haunt, and inspire. Civilians remembered the nights of fire, the days of hunger, and the quiet heroism that persisted amidst chaos. For the world, Stalingrad became an emblem of turning tides, the moment when courage met strategy and humanity withstood annihilation. Its streets whispered lessons of sacrifice, of moral courage, and of the relentless struggle to survive against overwhelming odds. Stalingrad's story resonates today, not merely as a historical event, but as a profound reminder of what humanity can endure and overcome. From the frozen rubble to the shattered streets, from the icy Volga to the scorched factories, the city bore witness to the extremes of war. Yet, in its destruction, there remained hope, heroism, and the unbreakable will to survive. Its legacy is etched not only in history books, but in the human spirit itself, a stark and cinematic reminder of darkness, courage, and redemption. Until next time, stay safe and see you in the next history video.